If you had told me at the beginning of June that hundreds of artists would join me in creating a giant monster or a giant robot every day for an entire month, honestly, I'd believe you. I mean, who doesn't love drawing giant monsters? But I would still be incredibly impressed, proud, and in total awe of the amazing work that came out of our channel's most recent drawing challenge, Kaijun. Kaiju, from the Japanese word meaning strange creature. June, the 6th month out of the year. Put those words together and you've got Kaijun, a month-long drawing challenge where artists design a giant robot or giant monster every day for an entire month. We used this list of one-word prompts to inspire us on each day of the challenge. Though every artist was designing from the same word, we each came up with very different designs. For example, this awesome-looking automaton was designed by Mike Delanoy for Day 30's prompt, Aegis. This unsettling creature, designed by user Kanini Cows, was made for the same prompt. Two very different designs, both inspired by the same one-word prompt. A single word can create innumerable different works of art. This design, done by Blue Carno, was done for Day 20's prompt, Reanimated. Here's another artist's take on the same prompt. This piece was done by Zelen. Here's a really cool interpretation of Day 27's prompt, Seraphic, done by Panito Art. Omen Milk made this gorgeous piece for Day 13, Root. This fearsome kaiju was created by Rob's Drawing for Day 16, Predator. Some artists even combined a few prompts to create a design, like this one, done by Scribblebird. It's a combination of Day 5, Jointed, Day 7, Primal, Day 8, Seismic, and Day 11, Psychic. These are just a tiny sampling of the full breadth of work done for this month's challenge. If I showed you every single piece submitted to our Discord and our Unveil community page, this video would probably be like 9 hours long, like no exaggeration. That's why I highly recommend you go check out our Unveil community page, The Subjectivists, and check out all of that work for yourselves. If you haven't already heard of Unveil, well, you should really check it out. Unveil is a for-artist, by-artist site where artists of all skill levels can share their work, connect with other artists, and participate in fun challenges like Kaijun. We've partnered with Unveil to host this challenge, and I'm proud to say that our Unveil community page has grown from about 20 members at the beginning of June to now over 900. If you want to stay up to date with the artwork that we do on this channel and up to date on new contests that we might be hosting in the future, be sure to click the link in the description and sign up for Unveil for free. Now, on our Unveil community page, we added a little extra friendly competition to this challenge. We asked all of the participants to pick a side, either accelerationists or stewards, and I'll explain what those mean in just a little bit. For each piece submitted, they would contribute to their chosen factor's overall score. Then we promised a little reward in the form of a piece of artwork done by me of some of our favorite designs from the winning team. I tallied up all of the submissions, and my god, there are over 1,400 of them, including the ones that are not tagged as either side. But now, we finally know which side won. Beating their opponents by a whopping 484 submissions, the winning faction of this challenge is the Stewards. Congratulations to you titans of industry. Your commitment to the manufacturing of new automatons to keep humanity safe from the Goliaths has not gone unappreciated. I'm gonna get to work designing a sweet-ass piece of artwork that you guys can use as either a phone or desktop wallpaper as your reward for winning this challenge. So keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. Now, if you're just joining us for this video, I highly recommend that you go back and check out some of the other videos from this series. If you go back to the very first video in the series where I first announced this challenge, I explain in a little bit more details the intricacies of the challenge, the rules and regulations, and most importantly, the story and the world of Kaijun. It's quite intricate, but here are the main historical points in the timeline. 1899, the Royal. The Earth opens in several locations around the globe. From these royals, massive monsters emerge. 1902, the War for Mankind. World powers align against the global threat known as the Goliaths. International cooperation accelerates the advancement of technology. Humans are able to develop and deploy weapons to stand a fighting chance. 1911, foundation of the Aegis Initiative. Several wealthy benefactors from around the world found a private corporation that specializes in producing state-of-the-art weaponry to combat the Goliaths. 1912, Project David. The Aegis Initiative deploys their newest invention, a massive automaton called David that proves effective in dispatching Goliaths in hand-to-hand combat. Similar automatons are manufactured en masse. June 1917, Victory Day. With the help of the Aegis Initiative and other automaton manufacturers, humanity is able to drive back the Goliaths. The World Council declares the war for mankind won, and global Goliath attacks reduce by over 90%. July 1917, the Manhattan Convention. World leaders and representatives from leading automaton manufacturers convene at Gracie Mansion in New York City to discuss the state of affairs. A division between two contrasting ideologies is formed. The accelerationist and the steward political values are defined. 1920, the Roiling Revelry. This year marks the beginning of an era that would come to be known as the Roiling Revelry. Nations around the world experience an age of prosperity and cultural revolution as massive automaton companies continue to provide jobs and promote international trade. The global threat of the Goliaths has mended many political feuds between conflicting nations and brought about something akin to world peace. The threat of the Goliaths remains, and the royals remain open, though heavily monitored and guarded. How long this peace will last remains an ominous concern dwelling in the general subconscious of humanity. Almost all of the pieces that we made for this challenge build upon this story, adding characters, major events, and of course, giant monsters. Today, we are going to take a look at all of the designs and illustrations that I did for Kaijun 2026 from day 1 to day 30. We'll also take a look at some of our favorite illustrations done by our fans and submitted to our Unveil community page for each week of the challenge. This has been an amazing month, and I'm genuinely so proud of everybody who participated. A drawing challenge like this isn't easy, take it from me, I know. And even if you are only able to complete a single illustration this month, you should still feel immensely accomplished. Congratulations to you all. I can't wait to join you all again for another month-long drawing challenge. Now, let's immerse ourselves in the world and artwork of Kaijun 2026. Take yourselves to an alternative version of Earth at the turn of the 20th century. Humanity is faced with its greatest threat yet, the Goliaths. How can we turn the tides of war to save mankind? Let's find out together. Day 1. Shell. One of the first Goliaths to emerge from the royals was a massive, turtle-like creature with a long neck and a shell resembling the face of a demon. It came from the sea, out of a royal opened some 3,000 feet below the surface. This Goliath made land off the southeast coast of Kyushu, near the city of Shibushi. Matakame, as the locals soon came to call it, crept slowly along the shores of southern Japan for almost 4 years, forcing citizens to flee their homes as it razed cities all along the coastline. Some believed it was searching for something, as its behavior seemed meticulous and calculated. Eventually, Japanese military engineers devised a way to defeat it, pumping a gelatinous foam into the 2 hollow horns on its back that discharged pressurized, scalding hot water. The next time Matakame attempted to use these weapons, its shell split open with a sound so loud it was heard in mainland China. Fragments of its shell are still sold for thousands of dollars as good luck charms. Day 2. Sentinel. After the war for mankind was declared won, the task of monitoring the royals became a highly desirable position for automaton manufacturers. Competing companies placed bids to earn contracts from national governments. The Aegis Initiative, backed by their reputation and a seemingly endless supply of funding, won most of these bids. Their newest automaton model, called Janus, was deployed in droves to stand sentinel by the royals and programmed to destroy any Goliath that may emerge. The Janus model has been the subject of criticism by many accelerationists who claim it is the epitome of the Steward's shortcomings. Extravagant, needlessly expensive, and designed as more of a boastful trophy than any functional form of Goliath control. The scores of Janus automatons that have been deployed have, thus far, proved to be effective in ensuring that no Goliath makes it out of the royals alive. Only time will tell if they continue to perform effectively. Day 3. Equine. In the winter of 1904, a royal in Rugby, North Dakota, produced the largest Goliath the United States had yet seen. The beast was dubbed Blue Sky by American officials. This gargantuan horse-like Goliath set a course due south, running at surprising speeds in a straight line and leveling everything in its path. Blue Sky's footsteps sent shockwaves through the surface of the earth, and the arms protruding from its chest would reach forward to grab and devour any living thing it encountered. The US military was yet unequipped to handle such an unprecedented threat and called for aid from allied nations. The Mexican government, fearing what havoc Blue Sky might bring upon their country once it reached the border, devised a plan. Using powerful explosives, Mexican and US engineers carved a valley across the southernmost edge of Texas. As Blue Sky approached, the Goliath caught its hooves in the valley, stumbling and crushing its legs under its own weight. The impact of its fall could be felt for miles. To this day, the remains of Blue Sky persist at the border between the two countries as a symbol of their alliance. Day 4. S-Stock. Before the founding of the Aegis Initiative, many governments around the globe commissioned their country's most brilliant engineers to devise some way of combating the Goliaths. Conventional weapons that had proved effective in winning wars against other humans, such as rifles, ironclad ships, and explosives, were next to useless when it came to the giant monsters. It wasn't until alliances formed between nations that a novel solution to this growing problem could be developed: weaponized automatons. The earliest unmanned machines were primitive by modern standards, operating by means of clockwork machinery and using short-range weaponry such as thrusting swords. They were also small, comparatively, with the D'Artagnan model standing at only 50 feet tall. Still, when deployed in groups, these clunky machines were able to take down Goliaths much larger than they were, eventually. Day 5. Jointed. Not all Goliaths pose an immediate threat to humans. In 1916, near the end of the War for Mankind, a royal somewhere beneath the Persian Gulf produced a number of crab-like Goliaths with crystals growing from their shells. These Goliaths were relatively small and lingered along the shores of Qatar without causing significant damage. The Global Defense Council decided that war efforts were better spent elsewhere, and the Hishrat Billori were left alone, albeit closely monitored. After the war was declared won, wealthy stewards sent extraction crews to Qatar to harvest the crystals from the shells of the Hishrat. To their amazement and delight, the Goliaths were able to regrow these crystals over time. Though the process of removing the crystals proved painful to the creatures, they never retaliated. To this day, the Hishrat remain on the coast of Qatar, closely guarded and routinely harvested by steward operatives. Day 6. Mercury. Accelerationist scientists work tirelessly to conceive more efficient methods of destroying Goliaths. Their work and research is almost always shared with the general public, in hopes that collaborative efforts might yield quicker results. However, a much more secretive organization known as Ouroboros operates behind tightly locked doors. They have publicly aligned themselves with the accelerationist philosophies, though they are denounced by many accelerationist politicians for their controversial research methods. In September of 1922, a mysterious entity appeared seemingly out of thin air over the Persian Gulf. In an instant, the shimmering 80-foot-tall humanoid smote the entirety of the Hishrat Billori population before steward security could intervene. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the entity broke apart into hundreds of thousands of metal droplets and scattered. Sources claim that the entity was created by Ouroboros and deployed in something like a test run, though its true nature remains a mystery. Day 7. Primal. At nearly 400 feet tall, the Goliath known as Katanga was the largest ever fought during the War for Mankind. Emerging from a royal in South Rhodesia in 1914, this cataclysmic-level threat wreaked havoc across Central Africa uninhibited for years. Though advancements in automaton technologies had been made from the start of the war, none were yet capable of handling such a titanic foe. From its one head, it would expel great beams of heat and light, turning all they touched into ash in seconds. From the other, supercooled air that dropped the surrounding temperature to below freezing instantaneously. This, combined with the incidental damage caused by its very movement across the continent, led to countless human lives being lost and drove innumerable plant and animal species to extinction. Eventually, European and Asian military powers, aided by Shona strategists, were able to use Katanga's weapons against it, when flying automatons goaded its two heads to breathe into each other's mouths. The massive corpse of Katanga has since become a city under the newly liberated Shona people's rule. Those were my contributions to the world of the Roiling Revelry, but there are a few more illustrations and stories that I want to share with you. These are submissions that we liked enough to include them in the official canon of the Roiling Revelry. Now, some of these stories have been slightly modified just for the sake of consistency, changing words like kaiju to Goliath. Anyway, with that clarified, let's look at our favorite stories and illustrations from this week. The first piece we'll look at today was submitted by user Baptiste Lecontre, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, for Day 1's prompt, Shell, under the team Steward. This story was written and submitted alongside the illustration. The mother arrived unannounced. She simply appeared one night, no wave, no sound, no witness, off the Atlantic coast of Ireland, near a small fishing village of a few hundred souls. At first, terror struck the villagers. Some flew far away, afraid of an attack. Most thought of a divine omen, and chose to stay and repent, waiting for God's wrath to strike them. But nothing. Days came, and still no sign of a curse, illness, or any form of divine punishment. Strangely, no journalist, scientist, or government official came to check on the monster, likely because a few old drunkards' tales of a giant sea monster didn't find big audiences in the nearby towns. The elders of the fishing town reunited and chose not to say a word to the outside world, deciding instead to keep praying and repenting. For everyone's safety, it was declared strictly forbidden to approach the shell. One night, though, one of the village kids, an orphan girl, too curious not to check it out, broke that rule and swam to it. She was never seen again. The next morning, it seemed that a white substance had formed at the base of the shell. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be something similar to mother of pearl, only it was too bright, too shiny, and it somehow felt like it emitted a faint eerie sound, like that of a distorted choir. The elders interpreted this as a sign that God had heard their prayers, and that its wrath had been appeased. This was his gift to them, and they alone were to receive it. In the following weeks, the villagers started harnessing the mother's pearl in order to craft religious items, or mostly to sell it. It is unknown why the mother produces more and more pearl each day, and why more and more people seem to disappear from the town. But the elders say not to worry about it, and to keep harvesting God's gifts again and again and again. User Jinsog submitted this illustration for Day 2's prompt, Sentinel, titled Friend or Foe. They wrote this to accompany their submission. Created by the Japanese manufacturer Yoki, Friend or Foe resembles an Oni from Japanese myths. A Sentinel-class AGG, Anti-Goliath Guardian, it specializes in defensive brute force tactics and operates best in shallow water or on land. Friend or Foe is outfitted with a clamping jaw, segmented appendages, and a plasma ray. Currently deployed in the coastal regions of the South China Sea and piloted by Daigo Suda, a former delinquent. Next, we'll look at an accelerationist submission done by user Insecure Bard for Day 3's prompt, S-Stock. They wrote, "The discovery of the twins was a truly horrific day in our organization's history. Never before had a humanoid beast of their stature or their destructive power been observed or even recorded. Their first recorded sighting was standing upright, miles into the ocean off the coast of Greece. Since that day, Otis has yet to be seen again, but Epheltes has been much more active. When Epheltes emerged from the abyss and made landfall on Vancouver Island, our organization sent, redacted, to eliminate it before it could reach the Canadian mainland. Before Epheltes was destroyed, it had crushed almost 20% of the island's forests, left 2 towns entirely destroyed, and caused the death of almost 20,000 individuals. The most sickening thing about the beast is its weapon, a piercing longsword which seems to be hand-sculpted from ancient stone. How a sword that large exists is incomprehensible, but what's more sickening is that it is likely crafted by Epheltes itself." This piece, titled Kentucky Bloom, was submitted by the user Bravo Benji Art on behalf of the stewards for Day 3 of the challenge, Equine. The artist wrote this to accompany their illustration. "Even those Goliaths that aren't outright hostile and destructive do have the tendency to wreak havoc in their own special ways. The state of Kentucky still hasn't announced if next year's Derby will be moved or outright canceled after the sprouting of the Kentucky Bloom. Ticket sales have remained steady, however, due to the unique viewing experience offered by the racetrack. Security has been tightened as both scientists and cultists have started to attempt the removal of clippings. Guards have been told to shoot on sight, in fear that these clippings could propagate into new Goliaths. Organizers hope that it will be dealt with by then, but as new vines and sprouts have been taking root, well, it's nice to hope." Here's another illustration for Day 3's prompt done by Perplexogram, representing the accelerationist faction. Their piece was titled Equus Umbra, and they wrote this to accompany their illustration. "The Equus Umbra, more commonly referred to as the Shade, is a ghost-like being that has been spotted a number of times, usually while another Goliath is being actively fended off or exterminated. During these events, it will mess with automaton operatives by galloping through their armor, causing short durations of power outages across all mechanisms within. Due to the fact that this has led to multiple deaths when the outcome would likely have differed if not for its involvement, many of the top researchers and mechanics of the world are actively attempting to find ways to kill it, or at the very least, prevent it from phasing through future automatons. Interestingly, on a few occasions, it has been noticed to phase through and annoy other Goliaths, seemingly taking the same sadistic pleasure that it does when messing with humans. Only one of this species has ever been documented, yet we are unsure if this is due to the fact that there are no others, or if it is just a coincidence that only this one has ventured out of the royals." Another equine illustration from Day 3's prompt was done by our very own Claire of Subjectively for the Stewards faction. Her design was titled Acela, and she wrote this to accompany her illustration. "Aegis Initiative Internal Intelligence, Post-Mortem Report, ID number, redacted. Acela, part of the first wave of Goliaths to appear through a royal, was unusually small and skittish. Just under 30 feet tall, Acela's initial adversity to human contact challenged mankind's budding understanding of Goliaths, then understood as single-minded avatars of destruction. Despite Acela's apparent shyness, Aegis Initiative leadership agreed that leaving the alien creature alive carried significant risk, and automaton operatives were ordered to terminate Acela, who had fled to unpopulated territory. When eventually cornered, Acela unleashed an unusual breath attack that immolated automaton codename Redacted and killing nearby field support operative Redacted. The creature was shortly thereafter slain without further incident. Isella is more notable for its cultural legacy than its body count. Recovered audio discs from the destroyed automaton leaked to contemporary news outlets, where they were published to a surprisingly divided public. Its squealing death cries alongside amateur photography of a seemingly violence-averse Goliath radicalized an offshoot of early Aegis Initiative critics, sparking a social movement that would eventually transform into a Goliath-worshipping cult known as the Shepherds. Okay, one more horse. Well, actually, several. I guess the problem with using a prompt like equine is that now the world of the Roiling Revelry just has a ton of different looking horse Goliaths. Anyway, this illustration, titled The Panama Event, was done by user Chester of Pigeons for Team Stewards and was accompanied by this story. Barely half a decade after it was first crossed by ship, the Panama Canal was crossed by a herd of Goliaths. 23 of them cantered out of the Pacific and through the canal, damaging 3 cargo ships, several walls, and U.S.-Panamanian relations. Panama, a majority steward country, was very unhappy when American accelerationist automatons killed all but 7 of the herd, including their leader. Between the cannons and the bodies, an anonymous Panamanian confided, the automatons did more collateral damage than the Goliaths. Most of those who made it to the Atlantic were foals who couldn't be accurately aimed at beneath the water, and concerns spread among sympathizers that the remaining adults wouldn't be able to take care of them all. The mystery no one could figure out was why the Goliaths seemed to have evidence of human care. Many of them had neatly shorn manes, and the leader's was braided. Panama called for the bodies to be disposed of respectfully, but the US claimed that they were under American jurisdiction, and they quickly disappeared. Day 8. Seismic. In 1921, after the end of the war, a Goliath known as Zhaoshan was finally destroyed after terrorizing rural Chinese communities for several years. Vibrating its massive wings, it sent tremors through its legs and into the ground, creating a cacophonous clamor that shattered eardrums and shook the very earth. With its body destroyed, the problem was deemed solved. That was until it was discovered that Zhaoshan had been laying thousands of eggs, shifting the earth to inject its brood deep below the surface. Chinese stewards were eager to collect these eggs for research, to learn more about the Goliaths, and for the potential value they might present on the market. The minority population of accelerationists in the country insisted that they must be destroyed without hesitation. Thus far, neither side has accomplished their goal, with both steward and accelerationist expedition teams going missing in the massive caverns created by the now-dead Zhaoshan. Day 9. Tempest. Automatons capable of powered flight were some of the last to be developed before the end of the War for Mankind. After the groundbreaking success of American inventors at the turn of the century, the technology spread throughout the world. By the 1910s, armed aerial vehicles were tested and deployed, but these machines had to be piloted by a human. It wasn't until 1917 that the first fully autonomous machines took to the skies to combat the great Goliath Katanga. These automatons, dubbed cloud cutters by their inventors, had many notable strengths, but also significant weaknesses. They moved quickly through the air, and could run on land as well. However, they were quite small, with a wingspan of just over 40 feet. They had to remain light enough to stay airborne, so they carried very limited weaponry. In truth, these earliest flighted automatons were designed as little more than distractions, keeping Katanga occupied and eventually goading it into destroying itself. Day 10. Abyss. Even during the era of the Roiling Revelry, some Goliaths from the war still remain, continuing to threaten the safety of all humans. In 1906, France and Great Britain sent fleets of warships across the Atlantic to provide aid to North America. All but one of these ships were lost. The survivors on board told of a Goliath so gargantuan that it was able to create a sinking vortex that pulled into its gaping maw every ship, human, and sea creature in its path. The alleged Goliath has never been properly documented, as any research team sent to investigate it has either returned empty-handed or not returned at all. International businesses, most of which are run and supported by stewards, push for the continued research and eventual destruction of Charybdis, as trade across the Atlantic has become an increasingly risky venture. On this matter, and few others, stewards and accelerationists are in agreement. Day 11. Psychic. Though the invention of the complex machines generally referred to as automatons was bred out of necessity, the significant decrease in Goliath attacks across the globe has led to major automaton manufacturers looking for a new market in which to sell their product. Consumer-grade automatons have become popular, much smaller machines that can handle chores around the house, as well as piloted machines designed for transportation. During a trade fair in 1922, a wealthy entrepreneur who had helped found the Aegis Initiative during the war presented his company's newest invention, a bizarre new piloted machine designed for personal protection against Goliath attacks. A singular, untrained pilot could enter a stasis chamber from which their mind would link telepathically with that of the machine. Suspended in an eerie green liquid, the pilot's dreamlike movements would be mirrored by the machine, controlling its arms, instructing it to hover in any direction, as well as operating a wide array of defensive weaponry. Accelerationists called it shamefully exclusionary, and criticized its exorbitant price point as a surefire way to ensure that only the rich survive. Many steward investors were hesitant to support the product as well, after the trade fair demonstration left the test pilot permanently comatose and the machine inoperable. Day 12. Mesa. From a royal in the arid deserts of the Arizona Territory in North America, a Goliath named Nechalda slowly emerged. On all fours, the behemoth stood at over 180 feet tall. When it reared up on its hind legs, it could block out the sun and cast a shadow that stretched for a mile. Native peoples from the Apache, Hopi, and Navajo tribes believed that the Goliath was an ancient spirit of the land and brought it offerings in hopes that they might be spared its wrath. They were not. Spanish and American settlers believed it was a demon sent from the depths of hell, and fired their rifles and cannons in hopes that they might destroy it before it devoured them all. They did not. The survivor of Nechalda's initial onslaught sheltered themselves in Fort Bowie, where they were able to remain undetected by the Goliath until aid from the US government and abroad arrived, eventually bringing down the great beast. Fort Bowie has since been declared the capital of the newly formed sovereign state of Arizona, governed by former Apache, Mexican, and American leaders. Arizona's shared trauma from Nechalda's reign of terror has made it an accelerationist majority country. Day 13. Root. One of the smaller Goliaths recorded during the War for Mankind emerged from a royal near Bearsbraun in the depths of the Black Forest. At only 60 feet tall, the elusive Bearwurtson seemed to pose little threat to the surrounding human population. In fact, the Goliath remained undetected for several months before suddenly laying waste to a newly constructed automaton factory outside of Offenburg. A unit of armed soldiers and automatons were deployed into the forest to find and capture the Goliath, to no avail. A year later, the factory was reconstructed, only to be destroyed by Bearwurtson once again. This prompted German authorities to initiate a controlled burn of the Black Forest in a desperate attempt to smoke out the Goliath. This was met with significant resistance by the people of Germany and made headlines throughout the world. German lawmakers put an end to the fire and passed legislation prohibiting new construction within a 10-kilometer radius of the forest. In recent years, even accelerationists are hesitant to pursue Bearwurtson, as it has remained inactive somewhere within the depths of one of Europe's largest undeveloped natural expanses. Day 14. Umbral. Anonymous sources report that a recent attack on the city of Hyderabad was not, in fact, the work of an unidentified Goliath. According to survivors, a noiseless monster blacker than the night sky struck in the early hours of the morning, laying waste to a high-profile British automaton manufacturing facility in the southern end of the city. This monster was not described to resemble any living thing of flesh and bone, but rather a machine made to look like a monster. Though it moved silently, the light of the moon reflected off of its metal hide, and smoke billowed from exhaust vents on its back. Of course, no automaton manufacturer claimed responsibility for the attack. International news media has accused rival manufacturers, Indian revolutionaries, and both accelerationist and steward extremists. The mystery remains unsolved, but the people of the world hold their breath in horrified anticipation for another attack. So those are my submissions for week 2 of Kaijun 2026. Just a reminder that if you like my artwork and you would like to make artwork that kind of looks like my artwork, you can purchase all of the brushes that I use to make my artwork on our Gumroad. I'll link that down in the description. A purchase from you would help support the channel and help you make artwork like mine. Now, with my submissions from this week out of the way, let's have a look at some of our favorite fan submissions posted to our Unveil community page this week. This illustration was done for Day 9's prompt, Tempest, by user A Ghost Named Jay. They wrote, "She twirls and glides in the sky ever so elegantly, but in turn creates storm clouds. Though she is known as a beautiful harbinger of doom, she seems unaware of the terror she brings. Many assume that she's sent down from a sky god to rain punishment upon the mortals below. Thankfully, she's a rare sight." They also included this artist's note. "Fun facts. Inspired by storm clouds, the sky, and manta rays. I wanted her to look misleading and appear more like sparkling water and ice crystals instead of a straight-up storm cloud, almost like a blue sky before the storm. She has 6 eyes which resemble gills and raindrops." Up next, we have a piece done by user DuskM for Day 10's prompt, Abyss. They included this artist's note with their submission. "I'll say initially that I had no idea what to do for this day. My mind was blank. Over time, the only tangible thing was to do what I think many thought, a big fish from the deep, but no, that is not how I see Abyss. The Abyss is a constant, always with a beginning, but never an end, a twisted spiral of incomprehensible nothingness that consumes not only your body, but your very soul. Hope this captures even a fraction of what I'm trying to say, and I think the design is cool." I really like this piece done by user Boss Xander for Day 7's prompt, Primal, titled Comagron. They wrote this to accompany their submission. "In the year 1899, many settlements around the Yangtze River Basin experienced a mysterious dread. Multiple individuals, mainly fishermen and children who went out on the riverbanks, started to disappear. As months went by, the number of missing villagers plummeted. The citizens still didn't know what caused the sudden disappearances, causing massive panic and superstitions. Many started to avoid the water, while other settlers abandoned their villages entirely. Many believed that the cause of these disappearances was a river spirit seeking vengeance on humans that keep defiling its water. However, they didn't know that the real reason for these incidents was a giant amphibian like Goliath that lurks on the river and streams. Because of its hefty bulk and soft, vulnerable skin, this Goliath rarely leaves the water, but if it does, it is mainly at night. Its main hunting method is by flashing its bright patterns to lure its victims to go near the water, putting them in a trance-like state. Then it will use its frog-like tongue to grip its prey underwater, and that will be its victim's final moments." Finally, user Sapphire Gold created the Great Galewing for Day 9's prompt, Tempest. They wrote this lore in addition to their illustration. The Great Galewing is one of the 2 high wings to have emerged from the royals in central Ethiopia. Its powers consist of weather manipulation, allowing it to bring on floods and intense tempests. For a period of time, the Galewing remained undisturbed in the African deserts, using its powers to bring unnaturally large rainfall to the area. However, accelerationist forces deemed the Galewing as a threat by disrupting the natural ecosystems of Africa, and mobilized forces to capture both the Great Galewing and its counterpart, the Great Scorchwing. Following the capture of the High Wings, the accelerationist forces attempted to modify both High Wings in an attempt to control them, and hopefully use them as a weapon against other Goliaths emerging from the royals. However, the experiment on the Galewing was unsuccessful, and it managed to flee from the accelerationist facility when its soul was undergoing extraction. Although the Great Galewing emerged weaker than before, its powers should not be underestimated, and it often clashes with a mysterious new High Wing that resides near the Pacific Ring of Fire. It is suspected that this High Wing, dubbed the Great Void Wing, has been experimented on by accelerationist forces. As of now, the Great Galewing has seemed to settle down in Southeast Asia, bringing about unnaturally heavy rain. Additionally, it seems to be much more wary towards any sort of vessel passing through its territory, oftentimes sweeping the ship or plane into the air with strong winds. Day 15. Pugilist. During the War for Mankind, many different weapons were used against the onslaught of the Goliaths. Collaboration between the most brilliant minds of nations all throughout the world yielded technological breakthroughs that would have otherwise taken centuries to develop. Plasma cannons, sonic disruptors, weaponized aircrafts, submersible warships, and, of course, the automatons. Most of these automatons utilized ranged weaponry to safely dispatch Goliaths without risk of the machine becoming damaged. The data shows, however, that automatons designed for hand-to-hand combat proved the most consistently effective. The controversial Ouroboros company developed and released one such automaton called Invictus, and unleashed it against Goliaths during the later days of the war. Unlike many other automatons of the time, Invictus was designed almost like a living thing, with its inner mechanisms functioning like sinew and muscle. Its movements were swift and agile, despite it being over 150 feet tall. Most surprisingly, its artificial intelligence seemed to revel in bloodshed. This patented automaton design has only ever been used by Ouroboros, and Invictus remains one of mankind's greatest weapons against the Goliaths. Day 16. Predator. The Goliaths are not a unified front. Wherever they come from, they do not come with the same objective. Some destroy all in their path, others choose to remain hidden, and some attack other Goliaths. The flying Goliath Valkyr haunts the northernmost coastline of Europe, drifting silently through the air and scanning the land below for prey. Humans, animals, even the occasional automaton are carried off to a great nest on the desolate island of Jan Mayen. What the beast hopes to catch, however, are other Goliaths. Very few Goliaths are capable of flight, and this means that Valkyr can attack from the sky before its prey knows what's coming. If its target fights back, Valkyr will use its singular eye to emit a hypnotic beam of light, able to put almost anything into a trance. The only prey immune to this tactic are the sightless automatons. Attempts have been made to destroy Valkyr's nest, but ships are unable to reach the island without first being spotted and destroyed. While steward manufacturers compete to create a machine capable of flight that is large enough to combat this aerial menace in the sky, accelerationists advocate that Valkyr must be left to its devices, as it is much more effective at killing Goliaths than any automaton. Day 17. Preserved. 5 years after the Janus model automatons were stationed at an oceanic royal off the coast of Alaska, the accelerationists' criticisms of their designs were proved astute. Their ornate armor rusted and decayed within a year, their limited combat functionality proved incapable of adapting to new Goliaths, and their internal programming was prone to malfunctions. The Aegis Initiative waited too long to take any action, despite the glaringly obvious issues. In 5 years' time, only a singular Janus model was left standing, and the Royal was left unguarded. Desperate to salvage what they could, the Aegis Initiative sent a team to retrieve the barely functional automaton. Its malfunctioning program had, for some reason, directed it to abandon its post and take shelter in a large coastal cave. When the team arrived, the defective Janus attacked, killing dozens of men and destroying the other automatons they had brought with them. Engineers still don't understand what went wrong. The automaton seems to be damaged beyond functionality, its power source depleted, yet it still stands, guarding its cave as if it believed this to be its new directive. The area has been made off-limits to the public, and the Aegis Initiative is now spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to ensure that this defective automaton does no further harm to their reputation. Day 18. Artifact. Since the first automaton was invented in 1912, engineers have experimented with a plethora of energy sources to power their machines. Electricity is sometimes used in smaller machines, but requires frequent recharging. Steam was a primary energy source in the first few automaton models, but the engines necessary to produce said steam were heavy and prone to combustion. Some automaton manufacturers have come up with their own patented energy sources. The secretive Ouroboros company uses a highly efficient engine for their automatons powered by something yet undisclosed to the public. Sabotage, corporate espionage, even attempts to destroy Ouroboros' automatons in hopes of reverse engineering their power source have all been unsuccessful. Whatever it is that keeps these unique machines running will likely remain a secret. Day 19. Mystic. There are rifts within both the Steward and the Accelerationist parties. Many who consider themselves stewards see the Goliaths as a manageable, sustainable resource. These opportunistic business folk go to great lengths in order to distance themselves from those in the Steward party who insist the Goliaths must be preserved not because they are profitable, but because they are gods. Extremist Goliath worshippers are highly dangerous, a notable example being the cult of Jeju Island. At the end of the war, an attempt to seal a royal within the Halasan volcano was thwarted by zealots who claimed to serve a dominant Goliath named Euron. Euron would feast on the Goliaths that emerged from the royal, and when there were none to sate its hunger, the cult of Jeju would offer it human sacrifices. Eventually, the royal was successfully sealed. With no Goliaths to feed it, Euron went on a hunger-fueled rampage, consuming everything on the island that moved until Jeju was left a barren wasteland. Euron met its demise when it attempted to swim from its island prison to the mainland, and the Korean military was able to strike it down. Day 20. Reanimated. In 1915, the now-defunct automaton manufacturer Ferris International attempted to weaponize the dead bodies of several slain Goliaths. Using controversial and highly experimental engineering methods, they were able to reanimate the dead body and replace its destroyed limbs with machinery. The resulting product was a disaster. Known only as Chimera, this abomination of steel and flesh was hardly able to walk, let alone fight other Goliaths. It was deployed to combat Nechalda during its rampage through the Arizona territory. Airlifted into the fight, it hit the ground and immediately broke its own legs. Driven not by instinct but by clockwork programming, Chimera continued to follow its directive, pulling itself across the desert towards Nechalda, which seemed at the very most to be immensely confused. Chimera then attempted to fire its arm-mounted artillery, which had so much recoil that it tore itself from Chimera's shoulder. Nechalda all but ignored this would-be foe, but before a team could be sent to salvage what was left of Chimera, the experimental power source provided by Ouroboros spontaneously exploded, obliterating everything in a 600-foot radius and sending Nechalda into a furious rampage. Nothing of Ferris's great experiment remained. Day 21. Temporal. Highly classified documents leaked to the public during the height of the roiling revelry exposed a terrifyingly confusing discovery. While attempting to seal a royal off the southern coast of Japan, a team of accelerationist scientists discovered dozens of what could only be described as juvenile Goliaths. Each one was only 5 feet tall, but they were as ferocious and destructive as their adult forms. The clutch of offspring was not destroyed, and instead sent off to be researched by Goliath experts from both the Accelerationist and Steward parties. The findings were inconclusive. Most notably, however, the baby Goliaths seemed to be genetically identical to the now-dead Matakame, implying they were not children, but rather clones. Subjects kept in a shared enclosure would quickly kill and consume one another, and scientists found themselves on a timer to learn what they could while the Goliaths still lived. According to the records, the remaining Goliath offspring vanished from their enclosures without a trace. One scientist suggested that what they had discovered were not clones at all, but multiple versions of the same Goliath that had somehow traveled through time in a bizarre form of temporal natural selection. Alright, so those are the illustrations that I made this week. Now, let's have a look at some of our favorite fan submissions from our Unveil community page. First off, we have this wonderfully uplifting Goliath, or should I say Neomorph, designed by user Bun of the Bean for Day 18 Artifact. They wrote this to accompany their submission. Tourists and locals alike come to the Cinders Vale Ancient History Museum. It's one of the most beautiful and rich of the region. Though recently, a new face has been seen entertaining and showing guests around. Opalescence is an eel-like neomorph who's taken residence in the museum because of its unique array of shiny artifacts. She's been much more of a help than a hindrance, and she is now considered family by the museum staff. Next up, a somewhat chilling illustration done by user InkMageJJJ for Day 17's prompt, Preserved. In addition to their artwork, they also wrote this lore that I'm choosing to include in the official Roiling Revelry canon. Thought to be just a newly discovered prehistoric creature, the entire study changed when near the bones was discovered what appeared to be a similar mask to that of a modern Goliath. Perhaps they've been crossing over far longer than we supposed. A design that's somewhere between terrifying and beautiful was submitted for Day 10 Abyss by user GoozeJam. They wrote this lore to accompany their piece. What do you do when your enemy is lying under your feet, yet you cannot do anything about it? Many would express that same concern after readings revealed a strange, massive Goliath lying in the depths of the Mariana Trench. Now known by scientists as Ignix, this Goliath seems to not pose any real danger given its current location, as well as its behavior. This Goliath resembles a combination of an anemone mixed with that of a flower. It contains a strange orange center surrounded by a cluster of petal-like appendages being held together by a mass of tentacles that dig into the earth. So far, it only seems to silently billow in the water, emitting a strange, constant glow which, due to circumstances, has not been properly studied. Here's a very uncanny automaton design created for Day 11, Psychic, and done by user Grody Gary. They included a brief description of their creation. It emits a sonic disruption proven to harm kaiju. The frequency is so low that only kaiju can hear it, and it can only be felt by humans. It is unsafe to use it in the immediate proximity of human settlements. Finally, we have this amazing atmospheric piece done by user Ember Bite for Day 17 of the challenge. There's no written lore to accompany this piece, but I think the artist did an excellent job telling a story through their illustration. Immerse yourself in the world of this piece and let your imagination fill in the gaps of the story unfolding therein. Day 22, Astral. The destruction caused by the Goliath known as G42 has yet to be matched. By some spectacular stroke of luck, or perhaps divine intervention, the asteroid-like Goliath struck from the sky not in any human-populated area, but on the unexplored continent of Antarctica. The light from the explosion of its impact could be seen for miles, from the shores of South America, Africa, and Australia. Earthquakes ravaged the southern hemisphere, and tidal waves battered nearby shores for months afterwards. The entirety of G42's impact on the surrounding ecosystem has yet to be investigated, as the Antarctic seas prove too hazardous for scientists to navigate. Scientists can only assume that most, if not all, living species were wiped out within seconds. Even in the prosperous days of the Roiling Revelry, G42 has plagued humanity with ceaseless questions. Where did it come from? Are there royals in the sky? Is the Goliath still alive? And when will it come for us? Day 23, Visceral. Since the disastrous failure of Chimera, other automaton manufacturers have attempted to weaponize living tissue to enhance their products. The most successful of these attempts was developed by award-winning bioengineer Wei Long as part of her work for the Aegis Initiative. Instead of stitching together the dead body parts of a Goliath and bringing them to life, she created a blueprint for a functional automaton and built 80% of it out of organic materials. Guilao Mark I stood at 120 feet tall, much larger than many contemporary automatons. It was able to move with grace and fluidity that only muscle and sinew can afford. This scientific breakthrough caught the attention of scientists and business folk alike, and positioned Long at the forefront of the anti-Goliath industry. According to public records, her contract with the Aegis Initiative was not renewed. Who employed her afterwards is unknown. Day 24. Artificial. Earlier automatons were sometimes designed with the Goliaths as inspirations. By modern standards, the Drachenfaust is a clunky, inefficient automaton and a crude impersonation of the actual Goliath it was built to resemble. At the time it was used during the war, however, it was known as the Artificial Dragon. The automaton was able to bring down multiple Goliaths after being deployed around Europe for 3 years. It was retired before the end of the war once newer models caused it to become obsolete, but it remains on display in the German town where it was built, as a proud memento of the ingenuity of early automaton engineers. Day 25. Natal. When it comes to the matter of Goliaths, indecision can often lead to disaster. Towards the end of the War for Mankind, a Goliath was felled in close proximity to a royal in the jungles of South America. The process of removing a dead Goliath is lengthy and expensive, and for months, local officials argued back and forth about what would be done with the body. After the Manhattan Convention, when the line was drawn between stewards and accelerationists, this issue became an opportunity for advocates on both sides to make their point. Stewards insisted the body should be broken down and reused, as Goliath corpses had been before. Accelerationists insisted the body should be destroyed entirely, claiming that reusing any part of a Goliath posed innumerable risks. The political gridlock left the body rotting in the heat of the jungle for months, though the stench was hardly the primary concern. Inside the putrefying corpse, another Goliath was slowly growing, feeding on the viscera within. Minokora emerged, 3 times the size of the Goliath it was feeding on. Experts believe that it will only get bigger. Day 26. Doom. The news spread slowly about the emergence of Minokora in the jungles of South America. Comfortable in the status quo of the roiling revelry, couldn't be bothered to care about a giant worm somewhere so far from home. The war had been won, and there was nothing more to fear. Surely an automaton or two would be dispatched and make short work of this nuisance. When a decision was finally reached and the forces were mobilized to take action, it was already too late. No longer a lush jungle, the land where Minokora had spawned was burned and barren. Intense heat radiated from a giant, glowing cocoon that made it impossible for humans to approach. Projectile weapons were burned up and destroyed before they could reach their targets. Automatons melted and failed from hundreds of meters away. Something pulsed from within the amber husk. Darkness fell, and all was silent. Day 27. Seraph. The roiling revelry was a time known for peace and prosperity. Politics sometimes caused tension, but on the whole, humanity felt safe and content. Perhaps this is why the emergence of Minacanyo from its chrysalis was never reported on. The countless lives lost, the destruction of the natural land on a scale comparable to a mass extinction event. Such devastation could send waves of unrest throughout the world, disturbing the peace. When the Earth's temperature rose by 8 degrees that day, and for a moment there appeared to be 2 suns, many looked up at the sky and smiled. What a lovely day, they might have thought. Regardless of who knew it, the angel of cataclysm rose high into the sky, setting fire to the air and raining death on all below. Very few who bore witness to this biblical destruction survived, let alone could comprehend what they saw. Minacanyo burned out, rising into space and dissipating into embers that sparkled in the night sky. The desolation it wrought will not be so easily undone. Day 28. Minuscule. Apocryphal rumors rippled across the globe, unsourced reports of disaster in South America. Stewards blamed accelerationists for their indecisiveness. Accelerationists blamed stewards for their lack of action. None but the few survivors of Mina Canio's ascension truly know what happened that day that the sun rose at dusk. The rest of the world can only sense the paradigm shift. For days after the unexpected disappearance of Mina Canio, the skies above were gray and purple, and the world was trapped in a murky haze. Embers fell gently from the sky like luminous snowflakes, followed by clouds of fiery red butterflies. Beautiful, some were heard to have said. Others cowered in anticipation of the end times. Eventually, blue skies returned. The embers ceased, and the red butterflies dried up and scattered like ash in the wind. Many would carry on, hoping but not knowing that the worst was now behind them. Our cities still stand, our people still prosper. We have peace, we have safety, we have comfort. There is no need to fear. History will remember these days as the end of the roiling revelry. Day 29. Opulent. Historians consider the roiling revelry to have ended around the beginning of the 1930s. At this time, all but 3 known royals had been sealed across the globe, and only a handful of known Goliaths remained at large, including Bearwurzen in Germany and the Great Charybdis somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. Other potential threats, such as the rogue Janus and the Goliath known as G42, were yet to be dealt with. The demand for automatons had drastically decreased, though manufacturers like the Aegis Corporation, formerly the Aegis Initiative, have still found a market with private, wealthy clients. Automatons like the Papillion model are smaller than the ones used during the war, but are marketed to the upper echelons of society as personal protection. Legislation regarding the ownership and operation of such dangerous machinery has yet to be drafted, leading to what some would consider to be an abuse of power. Day 30. Aegis. The first automaton designed to combat Goliaths was built in 1912 by the Aegis Initiative, a group of engineers from all around the globe. Nicknamed David, this 97-foot-tall machine was not built to conquer lands, claim human lives, or destroy cities and towns. This was the first recorded instance of humans from all corners of the map collaborating to achieve a singular goal: protect mankind. David was effective at dispatching Goliaths not only with its long-distance artillery, but in hand-to-hand combat. It operated without a pilot and followed its directives with clockwork precision. David was retired after 4 years of active duty, when newer automatons, combined with years of wear and decay, diminished its efficiency. Much to the dismay of its creators, the original David was stripped for parts and repurposed to create the next generation of automatons, including the David Mark II. Decades later, the legacy of this marvel of human ingenuity, resourcefulness, and community has started to fade. Times were changing. From a war to protect all of humanity to an era of prosperity and peace, followed by negligence, hubris, and unprecedented destruction. The Aegis Initiative, originally founded to protect humanity, incorporated. They replaced a council of international legislators with a CEO and shareholders, and rebranded from global peacekeepers to the leading manufacturer of automaton technology. Other private companies who had once worked in tandem with Aegis soon became business competitors. The line between steward and accelerationist ideologies began to blur, as values shifted from concerns about Goliaths to fears of poverty, hunger, and war. Humanity had ridden itself of a common and in place of this global threat, we once again turned on each other. David is an antique, not only in a literal sense, but as a symbol of unity, dismantled and repurposed to serve a greater objective. And now, to wrap up this video, let's have a look at some of our favorite fan submissions from the 4th week of Kaijun 2026. This illustration, done by user MossyStone23 for day 28, explores the little-known science of Goliath reproduction. They wrote, "How Goliaths reproduce has been one of the greatest questions of the war, as well as the roiling revelry. It seems that what Imperador Lernea left behind might just reveal the answer. Debates often rage on for months about what to do with the corpses of fallen Goliaths, which often allow life to find a way to continue. Leftover brain matter from Lernea had begun to develop into another living organism in the form of asexual reproduction. What arose was another genetically identical baby version of Lernea. The three heads possessed smooth brain matter and curious personalities, suggesting that Rufus was a genetic mutation of stunted growth by the brain cortex. The baby Goliath was moved to an observation facility while cleanup crews are actively being dispatched to burn the remains before any other Goliath arises." This piece was done by user The Scale Carver for day 19's prompt, Mystic. They wrote some lore to accompany their illustration. Another Goliath has made itself known after years of eluding local Scottish fishermen. The legend of the Loch Ness Monster has been well known in the Scottish Highlands for centuries, but with no concrete proof after so many alleged sightings, it was becoming hard to believe its existence. That was until recently, when peace finally started to form after many of the most deadly Goliaths were slain or repelled. There grew more supposed sightings of the Loch Ness Monster, but the physical descriptors were stranger. It was now larger, more colorful, and had kelp-like fins. It finally showed itself as it stole a net full of fish from a fishing vessel over a year ago. Despite its thievery, the creature appears to be not hostile, and would rather hide in the depths or hunt only the local aquatic fauna. Many accelerationists insist the Goliath should be euthanized, as it could pose a threat to the locals, but many stewards and locals defend the creature. Its elusive nature, graceful appearance, and passiveness make it a not clear threat like many other Goliaths. And it has raised tourism to the lake. Some fishermen even joke about finally having the chance to catch a real Nessie after one had eluded them for so many years. Next up, we have this submission done by user Avoli for day 25. This story accompanied their artwork. In 1925, the population of Cambodia witnessed a magnificent meteor shower. Yet, this spectacle was the last thing they ever saw. Doctors who examined the victims found that their retinas had been burned, as if they had stared at the sun for too long. According to numerous accounts, the shower lasted only a few minutes. Teams of stewards and accelerationists, accompanied by automatons, were dispatched to the site to investigate the cause of this blinding phenomenon. After several weeks, they finally discovered it. A great, luminous creature featuring a shark-like jaw emerging from a body that resembled the starry sky. It emitted brilliant orbs of light that, like tiny stars, would explode after some time. The creature appeared impervious to attack and impossible to move. An automaton carrying a powerful bomb was sent into an opening at the base of the creature's neck, successfully penetrating its body. The resulting detonation was so violent that it was heard from miles around. The Goliath then evaporated, leaving behind only its jaw as a trophy. This jaw was subsequently displayed in a museum as a memento of the Goliath, which had been named Lightbringer. User Goated with Sauce created this awesome automaton for day 27, Seraph. It was one of the few designs for this prompt that was an automaton and not a Goliath. They wrote, "By the time that Ravinius arrived in Rio, there was an answer ready to greet it. Throne was deployed early after years of experimentation. Ouroboros was never able to perfect it. The automaton was far swifter than its hulking size would indicate due to being created with the remnants of a previous royal. The pure energy of the beyond fueled this great monstrosity, and despite humanity's best wishes for it, despite its angelic appearance, Throne had no regard for human safety. Its sole purpose was to eliminate Goliaths, and the damage left in its wake was severe to all of Rio, caking it in the splayed feathers and broken bones of Ravinius. Upon finishing its task, Throne was instantly recalled, and Ouroboros could take no credit for their years of toil and effort." And finally, user Evo combined the prompts of temporal and astral to create this stunning design. They included a brief field log to accompany their piece. Often found floating through space, this mechanical Goliath measures time with its cane. It functions like an hourglass, but instead of sand, it is filled with tiny star-like specks. Thank you all so much for watching. Once again, congratulations to everyone who participated in this challenge. Don't forget to check out our Unveil community page to see full images of my work and the work of hundreds of other artists who participated in this challenge. You can also use the link in the description of this video to join our Discord, and you can check out even more submissions to the Kaijun Challenge there. Peace, love, and a big thank you to everyone who supports our channel through our Patreon and as channel members. I'll see you all in the next video.